Welcome to the 5,515th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. Rotary One is the world's first service club. Thank you all for coming today in these very, very difficult times. We very much appreciate you joining us. We have visitors from all over the world, and we have a group of honored guests from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. As is our tradition, we begin the meeting with a Rotary moment. And what I like to do at some of these meetings is to showcase the club of one of our visitors. And today we have a very distinguished visitor from a very distinguished club, Bob Hope from the Rotary Club of Atlanta. The Rotary Club of Atlanta was founded in 1913 and could we get the next slide, Shelby? The Rotary Club of Atlanta was founded in 1913 when four friends, including Henry Grady and Ivan Allen Sr., got together. Later that year, Ivan, another member of the newly founded Rotary Club of Atlanta, traveled to Buffalo, where the Rotary convention, the national convention at that time, was held. It was at that meeting in 1913 when Rotary adopted its motto, service above self. You see here a picture of what Atlanta looked like in 1920 and what Atlanta looks like today. The Rotary Club of Atlanta has come a very long way from those early days in 1913. It is now one of the preeminent business organizations in Atlanta with many, many, many distinguished governmental and business leaders in the club, not the least of which is Mr. Hope, who joins us today from Atlanta. The Rotary Club of Atlanta does many wonderful projects in keeping with our theme of criminal justice today. One of their signature projects is combating human trafficking. They have a task force that was highlighted in 2018 to combat human trafficking, on which Mr. Hope serves. So Bob, welcome. And thank you very much for coming.
Great, thank you. What a great treat to see our club highlighted by Rotary Club One. So thanks a lot. I enjoyed being here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, people should know that Bob is a very distinguished businessman. He served many different roles in the PR industry and was the VP for PR for the Atlanta Braves when Hank Aaron hit his record-breaking home run. And Bob, you should know that I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Hank Aaron is a legend. And that night in 1974, I was glued to the television set with my parents watching him hit that home run. So he did a very good job of publicizing that event. But anyway, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you. And I also, let me throw in that there is no nicer human being on earth than Hank Aaron. I mean, what a treat it was for me to be around him and work with him, and actually to be his friend to this day. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person. And he loves Milwaukee, by the way.
Well, thank you for that. Next up, we have our thought of the day. And today it's going to be shared by one of our newer members, Michelle Curtin Stewart, who is also one of our volunteer coordinators. Michelle.
Thank you, Marshall. Good afternoon, everyone. Since this is National Poetry Month, I selected a poem by Nikki Giovanni. It's entitled The Sacred and the Vulnerable. And the poem seems appropriate as we enter another week of stay-at-home orders and we learn about the ongoing and increasing disproportionate impact of COVID-19 deaths in Black communities, nursing homes, and the red flags being raised by those who are incarcerated. So again, the title of the poem is The Sacred and the Vulnerable. On a foggy night, with the sort of misty rain that is wonderful for sleeping, but nothing at all for driving, I traveled home from a great dinner party. We were all so jolly, driving my 90-year-old aunt who was visiting from out of town. We were catching up on family and arguing politics. I turned up our mountain just as I admonished her. But the president hasn't done anything about jobs. When something said, "You are going too fast," it may have been the wine that evening, but I have to confess, I speed a lot. So I heeded the voice. My eyes always sweep the trail leading to my home from side to side. There's always a cat or raccoon, seldom a coyote at this hour of night. The turtles and snakes are in bed. My aunt asked, "Why are you hitting your brakes?" When a beautiful white strip surrounded by shiny black fur with fear in her eyes got caught in my headlights and stopped. I stopped too and waited. She continued her journey across the trail, and I hope home to her babies. We need to watch for the sacred and the vulnerable. One day it may be us. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you very, very much for that. We appreciate the sentiment. And now we'd like to get to the main event. Our guest of honor and speaker today, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. Our member David Hirsch is going to introduce her, but before she begins speaking, I just want to let you know that she's willing to entertain some questions at the end of her presentation, but her time is extremely limited today. So if you have any questions, if you could please type them in the chat box as the presentation proceeds. And when she's finished up, I will read the questions from the chat box. We'd appreciate it if there's only one question per person. David Hirsch is one of our very distinguished members, a member of our program committee, and whose life has been extremely busy dealing with investments in a very volatile market. David?
Marshall, thank you for the brief introduction. Bob Hope down there in Atlanta. Good to see you, buddy. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. Ms. Foxx was born and raised in Cabrini Green on Chicago's near north side. She's a graduate of Southern Illinois University, where she earned her BA in political science as well as a JD from the SIU School of Law. She has served as Assistant State's Attorney for 12 years and was also guardian ad litem, where she worked as an attorney advocating for the children navigating the child welfare system. Prior to being elected State's Attorney, she served as Chief of Staff for the Cook County Board President, where she was the lead architect of the county's criminal justice reform agenda to address racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice systems. She's the first and only prosecutor in the country to make a felony case level data available to the public. The Open Data Portal provides unprecedented access and transparency in the work of a prosecutor's office. Her goal is to make the Cook County the most transparent prosecutor's office in the country. She's also the first African-American woman to lead Cook County State's Attorney's Office, the second largest prosecutor's office in the country. She took office in December of 2016 with the vision of transforming the Cook County Sheriff's Office into a fairer, more forward-thinking agency focused on rebuilding the public trust, promoting transparency, and being proactive in making all communities safe. It's my pleasure to introduce one of Chicago's very own Cook County State's Attorney, Kim Foxx.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for having me here today for your meeting. I will confess that this is the first ever speech that I have given via Zoom. And so this is a new experience for me and reflective of our times. I want to thank you all for continuing your good work and good efforts in these meetings, even in these unprecedented times. And as we adapt to our new reality, the need for discourse and conversation about the conditions in our cities and our countries, and about the real needs for justice for all must continue. However, that must take place. And so with this new and burgeoning technology, I thank you for having me. The challenge that it presents, obviously, is looking into a camera, which doesn't allow me to look at my notes. And so I ask for your patience and your grace as we embark on this conversation. As was noted in that very thoughtful introduction, I've had the privilege and honor to serve as the Cook County State's Attorney since December 1st of 2016. I took over an office which is the second largest prosecutor's office in the country, second only to Los Angeles. An office that has about 800 lawyers and 400 administrators and its own investigative unit with a total of about 1,300 people who work for us. Our mission is to provide justice for those who have been victims of crime, as well as to advocate on behalf of the county in all measure of civil litigation. We do everything for the county as representing them in the health and hospital systems. We have the third largest health and hospital system in the country that provides medical care for the most vulnerable in our communities. We represent the hospital and the doctors when they're sued. We do civil rights litigation. We represent the jail and the sheriff. We have the largest single site jail in the country that has had a large population. And we advocate, as I said before, on behalf of those who have been victims of violent crime, those who have lost children to gun violence. And here in Chicago, we continue to struggle with an epidemic of gun violence, unlike anywhere else in the country with major cities such as ours. And taking over this role in 2016 was a tremendous honor for me because I am a born and bred Chicagoan. As was noted in my bio, I grew up here in one of the toughest public housing projects in the country, Cabrini Green. And I mentioned that in my bio. It's something that I'm very proud of because it is that experience, having grown up in poverty, in public housing, living on the margins, that has informed the way that I've approached this work. It's informed my career, whether advocating on behalf of children in our foster care systems who had suffered abuse or neglect, or to working as an assistant state's attorney in the past, advocating on behalf of those who've been harmed, to working for President Preckwinkle, who was the president of the county, as our chief of staff, addressing issues of inequality in our communities. It's that personal experience, having come from a neighborhood that had been impacted by violence, being the child of a single mother who was a teenager when she had me, and myself being a survivor of sexual abuse and assault, that informs how I approach this work. When I came in 2016, the challenges of gun violence and restoring the public's trust with the criminal justice system in the wake of Laquan McDonald were our most pressing problems. And we continue to struggle with transparency, with trust, with violence. But over the course of the last 4 years, we started doing things like making our work transparent to the people for whom we serve. It's really important to me that the people for whom we go to court for, that we go to the office for every day, know what we're doing and how we do it. It's why we had the first open data portal of a prosecutor's office anywhere in the country, where people could go back all the way to 2012 to look and see how this office, not just under my administration, but those who have preceded me, handled cases. Were we being fair and just and equitable? Were we treating cases that happened in one part of the city the same way we were treating them in the other? Were we inadvertently perpetuating racial inequalities in the way that we were administering justice because we didn't have the ability to look and see the impact of our decisions every day? Leading in the effort of transparency then allowed for other prosecutors' offices across the country to also share their data on a public data portal. I believe it's important from a public policy standpoint that you cannot fix that which you cannot measure. You cannot implement policies if you're not able to track the impact that you're having on people's lives, particularly in the space of criminal justice. The weight of the work that we do in the criminal justice system is quite heavy. We have the ability to charge people with crimes, to deny them their freedoms and their liberties while they await trial. We make determinations about sentences, whether someone will have to serve the rest of their lives in sentence or in prison, or whether someone deserves a second chance and can get probation. It is these weighty decisions that we make that require us to be thoughtful and logical and fact-based in our determinations, and not simply moved by politics or emotion. And the reality is, in our criminal justice system in this country, so often criminal justice policy over the last several decades have been moved not by data and analysis, but by emotion and politics. We so often talk about rhetoric around tough on crime, that when things happen that are out of the ordinary, when people are fearful, there is an instinct in this country to reflexively do that which we think will make us feel better, laying our hands down harder, saying that we're going to be tougher, but not at the same time asking what is the impact of those tough decisions. When I came into office in 2016, one of the emblems of that policy making thinking was our jail. When I came into office, there were almost 10,000 people at the Cook County Jail on any given day. 10,000 people. These are people, as a reminder for those who may not know how our justice system works, jail is the place where we put people before trial. They are still presumed under American jurisprudence to be innocent until proven guilty. It's my job and my office's job to make that, to overcome that presumption in a court of law. But what was happening was that we were arresting people and we were incarcerating them pre-trial, before they had their trial, on bail, because these people could not afford to pay the money to secure their freedom. We had this notion that we could and should hold people on monetary amounts in an effort to keep them in jail so that we could be safe. The reality was we weren't keeping our community safe. When I came into office in 2016, it was the bloodiest year in the city of Chicago in almost 20 years. We had 760 people plus who were victims of homicides just in the city of Chicago. There were over 4,000 people who were shot in the city of Chicago alone. And yet we had a jail that was teeming with 10,000 people. And we peered into the jail, and looking at our data and analysis, what we found was that the majority of the people who were there weren't there for guns or violence. They were there because they couldn't afford their bail on things like drug possession. We had a lot of people who are addicted to drugs here in Cook County, people who suffer from mental health issues. We had a lot of people who were poor and on the margins in our jails. And those who we were afraid of were able to pay their way out of jail. The dirty little secret was that people who were engaging in violence and gang activity, part of their business model is being able to afford to get out of jail should that happen. And so they could, even with high amounts, post an amount that would allow them to go free. And at the same time, we had people literally in our jails who were stealing food to feed their families in times of need, who couldn't afford something as little as $100 to get out. That we had a large homeless population that were populating our jails because they couldn't afford to get out. And once they did, they had nowhere to go. I start there because as I look at where we were in 2016, 10,000 people and the people who were there, and where we are now in the midst of COVID-19, in the midst of looking at what this virus, this disease has upended our communities and what it's done to our criminal justice system. I sit here with you today to tell you that the Cook County Jail is now the lowest it has been in recent memory. There are 4,148 people in our jail today, 4,148 from 10,000 4 years ago. What's happened? What happened was a deliberate effort by the criminal justice stakeholders here in Cook County to work together to ensure that the people who were in our jails were there because they were a threat to public safety and not because they were poor. We worked on bond reform for the last several years, where before COVID-19 in March of this year, we'd reduced that jail population by 45%. And then the pandemic hit. And as was noted prior to the poem, the pandemic was hitting in areas of our communities, largely the African-American communities, in devastating ways, disproportionate to others. Where we saw tremendous hotspots were in our jails and prisons across the country. And here in Cook County, we were seeing the same thing. So on March 11th, which is the day I believe that our world changed here in the state's attorney's office, I watched the news like everyone else and saw that NBA was canceling their seasons. And Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson were announcing that they had been exposed and that there was conversations around shutting things down. And the first thing we had to ask ourselves, well, what were we going to do for those who are vulnerable in our communities, in our jail? I work with our public defender, Amy Campanelli, who is one of the most fierce advocates on behalf of those for whom she represents. And we work to identify those who could safely be released from our jails while dealing with the COVID-19 epidemic. In the course of the last 5 weeks, we've been able to drop our jail population by an additional 25% by working together. And again, going back to that fundamental issue, are those people there because they're a threat to public safety, or are they there because they can't afford their bonds? And the reality was that even though we'd made such tremendous progress in the last 3.5 years, that this last month exposed what I think the world is being exposed to, is the continued inequities for those who live on the margins. That those 1,400 people who were able to be released just in the last 5 weeks were largely African American, largely came from poor communities, and overwhelmingly were there for nonviolent offenses. It's important to talk about this as it relates to the broader issues of criminal justice. When we talk about our neighborhoods that have been impacted by violent crime, and because I can't ever not interweave the two. Those neighborhoods where on the south and west sides of the city of Chicago, where we lose more people to gun violence, are the same neighborhoods where we're seeing a disproportionate impact to COVID-19. These are not connected. What COVID-19 has allowed us in the criminal justice system, in the public health system, and in our social safety net system, to be able to sit and see the commonalities of the people for whom we serve. That when we look at the disproportionate impact of incarceration in the criminal justice system, 70% of the people who are in our jails right now are African American, 70%. When we look at the disproportionate deaths for COVID-19 in the city of Chicago, 70% of them are African American. When we look at the neighborhoods that have been most impacted by COVID-19 in the criminal justice system, prior to COVID-19, they had the highest unemployment rates. They had the lowest educational attainment rates. They had a severe lack of access to resources like grocery stores, mental health services, and medical services. When the public health data showed that the people who were dying disproportionately from COVID-19 were African Americans who had underlying health conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. It's the same communities that also had a disproportionality around gun violence. Why do I say all of this? My job as a state's attorney is to keep our communities safe. And it is to be rooted in data and not anecdote. It is to be able to fashion policies that keep us rooted in facts and reality. And the facts and reality are being ever more exposed as we deal with the COVID-19 crisis in the same communities that we deal with gun violence. And so it has been my position as the Cook County State's Attorney, as someone with a lived experience on the margins, that our policy agenda must address those issues, addressing mental health in our communities, that these same neighborhoods that are dealing with the impacts of gun violence also have high incidence of trauma. That we have young people living in neighborhoods who have lost classmates, fathers, grandfathers to gun violence, and they show up every day. That we must deal with public health, that the access to care, healthy, thriving communities have less violence. It's one of the things that I tell people, that when we look at a map of our city, where we see high incidence of violence and where we see lower incidence of violence, there's really big indicators of why that is. It's not the people. I want us to reject the notion that somehow there's a group of people that are prone to violent behavior, and that's why you see them overrepresented. Simply not true. The reality is that neighborhoods that are healthy and thriving have less crime. My neighborhood, Cabrini Green, that public housing project was torn down 10 years ago. And since then, there's been development that has burgeoned in those areas. You see far less crime in the area of Cabrini now than you did before, and not because the violent people left, but because there was an investment in those neighborhoods, that there are grocery stores that are fully available. There's exercise equipment. There is the opportunity for employment. The employment rate is significantly higher. In the neighborhoods where we see the violence, the unemployment rate is incredibly high. The access to care is incredibly low. What I'm hopeful for in this new time, in this conversation about racial and structural inequity, about the conversations of the social safety nets of our public health systems, is that we are thoughtful and as engaged in the work around our criminal justice system, that we use the same urgency, that we use the same dedication, that we're playing right now to address the COVID-19 crisis, to address violence in our communities. They're the exact same factors. These are the exact same conditions. And while we know that gun violence is a public health issue, I'm hopeful that in the midst of this crisis, we treat it as such. While we know that drug addiction is a public health issue, I am hopeful that in this crisis and the lessons that we learn, that we treat it as such. While we know that mental health plagues our communities, I am hopeful that we stop using the criminal justice system as the default to dealing with mental health in our communities. And so, as trying and horrific as these times have been, as we've continued to brace ourselves for the aftermath of COVID, I'm actually inspired of what can come out of this. The innovation, the thoughtfulness, the creativity to address these issues in ways that we haven't done it before. That we have an opportunity to blossom from this and leave behind the old ways that didn't keep our communities safe. That from this, as we've reduced the jail population without an increase in violent crime, that we're able to say, what are the lessons learned and how do we apply them? That as we seek to address the public health crises, that we don't decouple that from the issues of violence in our communities. And how do we work collaboratively, the criminal justice stakeholders and the public health stakeholders, to work together to deal with trauma. There's a collective trauma that we're all contending with right now. The loss of jobs, the loss of lives, the loss of our sense of normalcy. And there's an empathy and a grace that we're giving those who are living through that. How do we continue that in neighborhoods that have been impacted by violence in our justice system? And so what I am encouraged by in all of this is the spirit that we have in community, not just here in Cook County, but across the country, to do more, to do better, to look after our neighbors in ways that we haven't had to stretch as far before. And as state's attorney, it continues to be my commitment to ensure that our criminal justice system keeps our communities safe, that our justice system is fair and equitable for all, and that we are rooted in a sense of compassion and a sense of justice and fairness and dignity for all. I once again thank you for having me here today in these unprecedented times. This is quite a different speech, not dramatically so, than the one I had intended to give prior to this crisis. But I think that this crisis has allowed for us to have a deeper layer to the conversation than we could have had had we not been in this place today. And again, I thank the Rotary Club for opening its doors and its computer screens to these types of conversations so that we can work in partnership to seek solutions for all. Thank you.
There are a couple questions that I'm going to ask, but before I do that, I know you focused on data, but I want to share a very short anecdote from my own personal experience that relates to what you just talked about. When I was a young lawyer, I tried several cases in the Layton courthouse, and the most memorable was one where I defended a 17-year-old kid who was arrested for being involved in a robbery that led to a tragic shooting. And this was a kid who had never been arrested before. He spent months and months in the Cook County Jail before I was able to get him bail. But after we were able to get him acquitted of the charges, he moved out and he ended up becoming a plumber and raising a family and being a very productive member of society. And I always think of him when you think about the experiences that young people and other people who are in the Cook County Jail because they can't afford bail or they don't have adequate representation, the experiences they go through that make the problem so much worse. And so we applaud your equitable approach to this, and thank you so much for coming. But now a couple questions. Exactly how is the state's attorney's office addressing protection of the prison population in the Cook County Jail against COVID?
Yes, as I said in my presentation, we've been working very urgently and deliberately over the course of the last several weeks to decarcerate safely as many people as we can. What we know about COVID, and it's ever changing, is that it is spread by being in close proximity to one another. And there's no worse place to have people than a jail or a prison because they are absolutely in close proximity to one another. And so our efforts have been to make sure that we could safely reduce that jail population by having people who we do not believe pose a risk to public safety released on some other condition, whether that's on their own recognizance, home confinement, or electronic monitoring. The fact that we've reduced the jail population by 26% in a month is rather unprecedented. And that's not just, again, that's not a Kim Foxx alone effort. That's been working with the public defender, the private bar, and the judiciary to identify folks who can do that. At the same time, we are very mindful for the people that we cannot agree to be released. And I want to be clear. We believe that in the interest of public safety, that there are those who still need to be detained at Cook County Jail, but they have a right to not be in conditions that impact their health and their lives. And so we've been in constant communication with the sheriff and others about, what is it that they need to make sure that the conditions at the jail are appropriate for the people who must be detained, and also just as importantly for the people who work at the jail, that they're the deputies who work there, the administrators who work there, who are in those conditions and then go back to their communities. We have to make sure that they are safe. And so while we don't directly impact what happens in the jail, we certainly have been advocating for and working collaboratively with the sheriff to make sure that he has everything that he needs to make sure that for those who have to be there, the conditions are safe.
A little more general question. What can the state's attorney's office as well as communities do to address the opioid crisis that is still with us, even though we're now focused more on COVID?
Yeah, and I fear that we're going to see a bigger impact related to the opioid crisis as a result of COVID. Again, as resources are shut down, as people are distancing, it doesn't mean that people who are addicted to opioids have lost their addiction. It's how are they getting it, what's happening, and how are we treating them? one of the things that we have done is we've convened a group of public health and mental health stakeholders together to address what we can do in terms of services and resources related to opioids. Now, we have sued on the civil side several opioid manufacturers, and that litigation is ongoing for their complicity in prescribing these medications that they knew had a high addictive rate, and for people who didn't need them. For the people who are suffering on the ground, we've been working with others on how do we deal with harm reduction? How do we make sure that we aren't losing people, people aren't dying out of fear of calling the police if someone ODs next to them? And how do we give people access to treatment? And so we're working with, and I think that work takes on greater urgency now, with community-based stakeholders to bring them to the table to say, are there ways that we can increase access to treatment? Are there ways that we can increase the work that we're doing in our drug courts, for example, for people who have been caught up because of their addiction issues, but we don't want to stigmatize them and we want to encourage them to get better. So it's an all hands on deck approach. From a community standpoint, I think we have to have more advocacy around harm reduction approaches. I think there has to be more advocacy around not dealing with drug addiction simply in the courthouse. Anyone who knows anyone who's been addicted to drugs knows that their rock bottom may take years, and that someone who's been arrested once, twice, 3 times, that's not necessarily a deterrent. And so not counting on the justice system and incarceration to deal with the opioid crisis, but an all hands on deck community-based approach to dealing with addiction.
Thank you. I know you need to head out, but before you go, when we meet in person, we typically give a small speaker's gift to our speakers. Each year we try to find an organization in Chicago that symbolizes the spirit of the city. And this year we reached out to an organization called Ignite, which teaches glass blowing to children of limited economic means. And we give a votive in the Rotary colors, blue and yellow, to our speakers. So we will send you one of these votives because unfortunately we can't give it to you here today. But please understand how much we appreciate your thoughtfulness and your willingness to share, and most importantly, your willingness to take the risk of doing your first Zoom meeting, which you did a tremendous job. So thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting, but we understand that you're busy, especially in these times. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. I'm honored and privileged. I spoke at Rotary a couple years ago, so the fact that I was welcomed back suggested that I didn't wear out my welcome. Again, thank you for what you're doing and your meetings and your conversations in these times. Now more than ever, your voices and your communion around issues is ever so important. So thank you all, and I wish you health and safety.
Most of all, be well.
Thank you.
It's the time in our meeting when we're doing something new, something a little different. We call this section of the meeting Joys and Concerns. So at this time, what we do is we go through and we invite people to share something that's bothering them, something that's going particularly well for them. What we found is that in these times of isolation, that really there are few outlets for people to share with large groups of people, and this is one such opportunity. So if you could unmute yourself, please show courtesy to your fellow Rotarians and guests here today, and just share with us very briefly something that bothers you or brings you great joy in these days. Hello, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, can I?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Suresh Rupchandani, Rotarian Suresh Rupchandani from District 3142, India. I am the District Chief Coordinator from District 3142. And I was the visitor in this club the Rotary Club won in 2017. And I had exchanged my flags with the current president at that time. Thank you for inviting me to this Zoom meeting. The point of concern today is our fight with the coronavirus. And India, I would share with you the experience what we are doing here in India about fighting with the coronavirus. Recently, our district had promised a substantial amount of money to the PM Care Fund and CM Care Fund from all over India on the call of RI President nominee Rotarian Shekhar Mehta ji. So in all, around 25 crore of rupees. I don't know how much it is counts to dollars. We had surpassed that amount, and we have collected around 101 crore of rupees, and we have given it to PM Care Fund to fight the coronavirus. And we are being regularly instructing our Rotarians to please stay safe, stay inside, and do the projects we are called for. We have been donating grocery items to the needy people in the slum areas and the poor urban areas, poor rural areas. And we have been donating lunch packets, dinner packets to the needy persons. And recently, we have also arranged a Zoom meeting with our National Health Minister and conveyed to him what Rotary is doing for the COVID-19. And he was full of praise for the Rotary, whatever we are doing to fight the coronavirus. And I hope that is enough from here in India. Thank you and nice talking to you all.
Thank you, Shiraz.
Well, I hate to be a bearer of bad news, but it's really sad to be missing you guys so much. And I got to tell you, having these Zoom meetings brings back so many good memories. So good to see most of you and your faces and some of the guests. And I guess there's a saying, it says, you never appreciate it until you lose it. And hopefully it's only a temporary loss of getting together. I wish you all the best of health and good stay. Keep it up.
My name is Ksenia, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm not a part of Rotary Club yet, but I've been on one of your meetings, and I seriously would want to. COVID caught me in transition in my career, so it's a little postponed every joining activities, but I'm really happy to be part of this. And in these times, it's actually I'm flattered to hear this terrific speaker and very moving insight into Chicago, for which I'm fairly new still. So thank you for inviting me. It's really good to be around so smart and so exceptional people. I will put my word out if you can. I'm doctor of medicine. If you can invite me for next meeting, I might bring a doctor from Spain if you're interested, who have been in the middle of this coronavirus crisis in Spain on front lines. So, but thank you very much for inviting. This was terrific movie meeting. And like I said, I just loved the speech and this insight, which I would never ever gain. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And actually, next week's meeting is going to be a breakfast meeting where we're going to feature 4 doctors from 4 of the hotspots in the country, or in the world, the United States, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and Italy. And so we would love to have your guest with us to share their insights as well. So I'd like to move on. We now have a tradition in this club, which we're adapting to in the Zoom world, of introducing our guests, both our non-Rotarian guests, our Rotarian guests from the United States, and our international Rotarian guests. So let's start with the non-Rotarians who are with us today. Could you just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and very, very briefly tell us how you came to the meeting? Thank you.
Yes, hi. My name is Laura. I'm a non-Rotarian, but I have attended a couple meetings in the past over in the downtown area. And I was just interested to find out more about what the Rotary group does and how to best get involved. Having trouble with my speaker. And I'm in the Southwest area. I grew up in Little Village. I worked as a CPS teacher, instructional teacher for 26 years. So now I'm looking for different things to get involved with and make a difference, I guess.
Thank you very much for joining us. We do have a special membership opportunity for anyone on the call who's interested in joining us. We're inviting people to join us at no cost. And once the COVID crisis ends and we resume in-person meetings, then you will start paying dues. But it will give you an opportunity to experience Rotary and see whether or not it's for you. Do we have any other non-Rotarian guests with us today? We have a very large crowd.
Yes, hello.
Alyssa, go ahead.
For some reason, I raised my hand because I didn't want to go where everybody else was going. Hello, everybody. I'm Melissa Mitchell, president of MGME Group here in Chicago. I was invited, someone in Kim Foxx's organization sent me an email, and I've been to a few Rotary Club meetings in Chicago years ago. And now I'm being more active in my community, especially in this current era, and just looking to get some information and take it back to community level organizations.
Thank you very much for sharing. Who's next?
Marshall, I'll go. My name is Tom Hulsman. I'm the executive director of the Chicago Regional Growth Corporation. It's the new regional economic development organization representing the 7 counties in northeastern Illinois and the city of Chicago. I won't get into the scope of work, but Don Garner over at the Union League Club talks a lot about Rotary, and when I saw Kim Foxx this morning, I thought it would be appropriate to jump in. So very much appreciate her insight on behalf of Cook County, and I'm glad to join you this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. We've had several speakers discuss regional development in the area, and we welcome you at a future meeting to share what your group does.
Thank you.
Who's next? Who else wants to introduce themselves who's a non-Rotarian?
Hello, my name is Sheyo Gundeji, originally from Nigeria, but I live in Chicago now. I work for Chase, JP Morgan Chase as an analytics or an analyst. I went to a couple of events last year, was really interested in joining. I got the member packet, which I'll be sending off shortly. So I'm really excited about the virtual meetings that I've seen so far and excited about joining the club.
Well, you made my day. Who's next?
Hello, Marshall.
Yes, Sana.
Hi, this is Sana. Thank you again for hosting this. I actually clerked for the State's Attorney's Office when I was in college and worked for Orchard Law School, and there have been a lot of changes. Mayor Daley, well, prior to becoming mayor, Richard Daley was the State's Attorney at the time, and I did see a lot of those things back in the late 80s that Ms. Foxx described. And I feel that the path that she's working on is the right path because, as she said, it's a lot of it's relating to people who are there for non-violent crimes and certain segments of society. So it's also unfair in that notion. So I'm excited to see what she do in her next term. And I will name Rotary. I just have to finalize a few things with with some of my other organizations, and then I'll be able to commit. So thank you so much.
Great. Who's next? Who would like to introduce themselves?
Mr. A. Thompson, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Wonderful. We bring you greetings from the Maywood Proviso Rotary Club. And just wanted to say I came in a little late, but I wanted to at least come in and support all of you guys' efforts. And a great job you've been doing.
Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah. Who's next? Okay. Why don't we start with the Rotarians who are visiting us today? I think the bank was very anxious, so why don't we turn to him first? Bank, can you tell us a little bit about your club? Briefly, we still have a lot of people on the line.
Yes, I'm Bengt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Bengt from Sweden, Bengt Holmström, and I'm joining this meeting invited by you. Thank you so very much. Together with a friend in my club, Lars Andersson, too. And we are so impressed of the way you are running this meeting, and you inspire us to do the same here in our small club in the countryside in the south of Sweden, Hammenhögs Rotary Club. I myself has been a district governor 2014 and 15, together with the RI President Gary C.K. Huang. You remember him, of course, and his theme, Light Up Rotary. And I think that you today have, you have really lightened up Rotary. So thank you, and I look forward to join further meetings. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Other international Rotarians who are joining us today? I think our friend Valdemar from Witten is with us. Valdemar, you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, I'm here. I am Valdemar Joschko. My Rotary Club is in Witten, in the western part of Germany. I also I'm visiting often the Warsaw Club, German-speaking club in Warsaw Goethe. My club is, of course, always with me. And I'm a lawyer, and what else? The best what today happened was rain coming down after more than one month. So we are very happy in my region, and yes, it's very, very nice. So all the best for you all.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Who's next? Other Rotarians who have not introduced themselves?
I bring greetings from the Rotary Club of Northallerton, Yorkshire in the UK. I'm really impressed with this new technology and really chuffed to be able to visit Chicago, which would almost be impossible normally. If anybody would like to join us, we meet Friday lunchtime on Zoom, so just send me a message. We'd love to have you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. All right. Anyone else who would like to introduce themselves? Going once? Going twice? Okay, just a couple quick announcements. As many of you know who have attended our other meetings, we are continuing to provide meals to healthcare heroes in the medical district and in the hospitals near Lincoln Park, as well as some first responders who are living at the Essex House. We to date have raised over $400 in addition to the money that we're contributing from our clubs, and we invite people to contribute. These meals are $5 a piece, and they are tremendously appreciated by the healthcare providers. So you can go to our website, and there's a place to donate. The Illinois Public Health Department still needs volunteers to deliver testing kits to nursing homes. Several of our members have volunteered to to make those deliveries, you can go to the district website and register to do that. I want to highlight our next two upcoming meetings because they're both very special. The May 5th meeting does something that I've wanted to do for a long time, which was convert our first Tuesday of the month meeting from an evening meeting to a morning meeting because I'm more of a morning person. And this week on May 5th, we're going to have a very, very special program at 7:30 in the morning. And it needs to be at 7:30 in the morning because we're going to be hosting medical professionals from Korea, the United Kingdom, and Italy on a panel that is going to be moderated by our very own Andrew Dykens, who is a doctor here, a family physician at the University of Illinois at Chicago. We're going to highlight these places, which are all hotspots in the COVID pandemic. And Andrew, who is very familiar with providing medical services overseas, he coordinates our Senegal project, is going to discuss what it's like to work on the front lines with these individuals who are in these hotspots. I encourage everyone to attend. It should be a very informative and interesting discussion, even though it's going to be very early in the morning at 7:30. So please join us for that. 2 days later, I want to call to the attention of our members. We are hosting a Zoom meeting of the first 5 Rotary clubs. That's us, Rotary 1, San Francisco, Oakland, Seattle, and Los Angeles. This first meeting is going to be a members-only meeting because the idea is to make introductions among the chairs of our various committees so that we can build relationships and collaborate with these clubs to do some very special things. We are planning, the first 5 clubs are planning to open up these meetings and try to attract speakers so that we can open up the collaboration to the entire Rotary world. If anyone has any questions about it, please give me a call. The meeting after that, the May 12th meeting, is also going to be very special, but special in a different way. We have Laura Truly, who has led the Adler Planetarium Citizen Science Department since 2015, and she's going to talk to us about the Zooniverse, doing real science with 2 million people around the world. I've seen Laura present before, and part of the program is going to be specially designed for children, children from ages 5 to 18. It's a way for kids to participate in kind of group science around the world. And we wanted to make this meeting in particular available to people with children because this is a platform that allows kids to really be interactive. And we know how many of you are struggling with young children at home. We've seen them kind of dance in front of the Zoom camera. And so we wanted to come up with a way to actually engage them in our meeting. So there will be a portion of this meeting that will be designed for children. So please bring your children and invite those that you know that have young children at home. So instead of locking them in a room while you're on your Rotary meeting, you can bring them out and work with us. Part of this meeting will be dedicated to them. Our annual campaign continues. We're taking some of the money that we're raising and using it for the Meals to the Frontline program that I discussed earlier. Our club committees continue to meet, but they're not meeting during our regular meetings. They are scheduling their own meetings. If you have any questions about when they're meeting, you can look at the club website. On May 30th, the district is hosting an annual meeting for the first time ever virtually, which is going to enable everyone who wants to participate without having to travel to the meeting. Each club is entitled to either 1, 2, or 3 delegates. And so if you're interested, please contact me, but everyone is welcome to listen in. Our Woman of the Year luncheon has been continued, rescheduled to September 22nd. So please save the date. We are all hoping that it will take place then at the Union League Club where we normally meet. So we are at that time in the meeting when we typically recite the 4-way test. And I want to go back to where we began, which is with Bob. And hope, Bob, as a distinguished member of the Atlanta Club, if you could lead us in the 4-way test. I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, but yeah.
There you go. Am I muted now?
You can lead us in the 4-way test, which is now on your screens.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And fourth, will it benefit all concerned? And that's the 4-way test.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but as State's Attorney Foxx said, we're all learning this technology, and we will get better. So thank you again for coming. Take care and be well. Meeting adjourned.